Hello, my name is Darren Eastman, and I'm the Senior Product Manager for GitLab Runner, SaaS, Core, and Fleet. Welcome to a demo video showing the setup and use of Podman as a drop-in replacement for Docker when GitLab Runner is configured to use the Docker executor on Linux. In the video, we will cover an overview interaction diagram of Runner and Podman. In the example, GitLab Runner and Podman are installed on a virtual machine running Ubuntu. I'll also briefly touch on the prerequisite installation steps for both GitLab Runner and Podman. Then I'll dive into the configuration of Runner and specifically the updates required to the Runner configure toml file to show the changes that you need to implement in order to use Podman as a drop-in replacement for Docker. Finally, I'll demonstrate building a container image using Podman and then also using Buildah as a container runtime. These pipelines will be executed on the runner that we previously configured to use Podman. Okay, before we get started then, let's do a quick overview of what a final setup looks like with a diagram. This is a representation of the environment setup for that I'll be using for the demo. Again, I've previously installed GitLab Runner on a host VM that's running Ubuntu Linux. I've also installed Podman as well. And the important thing to note in this diagram is that GitLab Runner is going to be communicating to Podman or with Podman using the API socket. And that's the key thing that we've been looking at when we get into configuration steps. And it's basically how do you set up GitLab Runner in order to initiate that communication to Podman via that API socket string. And so to recap the steps that you're going to be required if you're going to be doing this in your own environment, and from scratch. So step one, obviously installing GitLab Runner on a target host compute that you're going to use for hosting the runner. And over here on the right hand side, I've linked over to the install docs. I'll show that briefly here in a moment as well. Step two, you install Podman as well because you're going to be using Podman in place of Docker as the engine for the GitLab Runner Docker executor in this example. Step three, you'll be checking the Podman configuration, and that's because you need to check and take a look at the API socket connection string because you'll need that information later on in order to configure or change the configuration in your runner config.toml file. Step four, configuring runner, which is basically editing the runner config.toml file. It'll be a one-line change. I'll show you what that change looks like here in the demo. And then finally, with all that set up and done, you'll be ready to actually then run a test pipeline job. The one thing I just want to call out is that in step one, when we talk about installing the GitLab Runner, it's assumed that if you're doing this, you're also at this point registering your runner to a GitLab project, group, or instance. Right? That's making the connection with the runner that you've installed on your host computing device with a project in GitLab so that you can then now run pipelines and using that runner as the execution engine. All right, so I'm just going to pop over really quickly and look at the documentation pages. So for step one, installing GitLab Runner, in my environment, I've already done this step. I'm not going to go over these steps in the demo. It's pretty straightforward. But you can see here is our docs page for installing GitLab Runner on Linux using our Debian or RPM packages. In my demo and in demo environment, I basically just follow these steps. So there's no secret sauce. There are no special configurations. Just basically following the steps here for installing Runner on Ubuntu. Popping over to Podman. So the Podman installation instructions are here on podman.io. Again, no special sauce for this demo, just simply using, and let me scroll down so it's clearer, simply using the installation instructions here for installing Podman on Linux. All right, so that's what I've done to get things going. I've installed GitLab Runner. I've installed Podman. I registered my GitLab Runner to a project in GitLab. So the next thing you want to do is check the Podman configuration, which is kind of sort of the most important thing to get this working in your environment. Let's go ahead and check out that configuration. So right now, you're seeing the SSH'd into the virtual machine that is the host for my GitLab Runner executable, as well as Podman. As I mentioned before, I've already installed both of those onto this virtual machine. And so at this point, the thing you want to do now is check the Podman configuration. And the command that we'll be using for that is systemctl status -- user podman socket. So entering that command, and this is the output that you will get. The important string that you need to look at, the one that you'll need for configuring GitLab Runner, is right here. This string here is the API socket string for Podman on this particular computing host. Your string might be different, and so that's why it's important for you just to check the string when you install Podman on whatever your computing host is. And so that is the string that I need to then now configure my GitLab Runner config.toml file, right? So the GitLab Runner config.toml file is local. Because I've installed GitLab Runner, it's local on this machine. To make things easy for the demo, I'm just gonna pull up a version of that same config.toml file in an IDE, so it's a little bit easier to see. So instead of me, popping into Vim here on this virtual machine, right? Again, once you install GitLab Runner, the config.toml file will be in the installation path for your GitLab Runner binary. Instead of me opening up Vim here, so it's easier for you to see, I have just copied over my config.toml file into this IDE. And I just want to call out now the most important area that you need to change in order to use Podman. And so when you open up your config.toml file for the runner that you've installed, these are the sections that you'll see. And the thing to note is you install GitLab Runner. During the registration process, you will choose, or you will need to choose, the executor type as Docker, right? Choosing the executor type as Docker will then automatically create this executors equals to Dockers section in your config.toml file. And so now when you go into edit the config.toml file, you will see this executor equals Docker section, and then you'll see this section here called runners.docker. And the change that you'll need to make is right here in the host string. By default, this host string, and it's documented on our GitLab Runner documentation page as well, by default, this host string defaults to using Docker engine as the container runtime. And so what you're doing is, as you can see here, kind of putting it side by side so you can see, I ran the systemctl command here to check what my string is. You can see it's /run user 1012. And now I've entered that into the host string here. And so what this is telling GitLab Runner on this machine is, okay, you're going to be communicating to the container runtime engine using this API socket string. Runner doesn't know it's Podman, doesn't know it's Docker. It just knows that, hey, this is the API string, and it just so happens that this API string is obviously, of course, going to be interacting with Podman. And so this is where the magic happens. You basically just need to enter this line into your config.toml file. You save your config.toml file. There is no need to restart Runner after you make this change to your config.toml file. GitLab Runner will automatically pick up this configuration change. So that's it. So with that step, I am now ready to test a pipeline job. So let me just pop over to a project and I can show you how this is all set up. So over here in my project, this project is called runner-podman-integration test. I've already pre-registered this runner that's over here. It's running on this machine. And you can see it's called Darren-podman test. I've added some tags to it, Docker, Podman, and so on. You can see the platform it's running on, right? So this runner is already registered this project. It's ready to pick up jobs. Over here on the actual runner environment itself, I changed the config.toml file to use Podman as the container runtime. And so what we're going to do is we're going to run a quick job to make sure this all works. So I've got a couple example branches, a couple of example jobs in this repository. And let's just pop over and take a look at the first one. And it's going to be what I call Podman container build. And for this example, I'm going to build a container using Podman as the container runtime engine for building that container. So I have a very simple project repository here. It's got a very simple, very basic main.go file. And then it has a very simple Docker file. I'm just going to pop into that so you can take a quick look. And it's a very simple Docker file. So the size of the Docker file we have to build is pretty small. I'm building it from scratch and just adding in the executable that's built from my main.go file. Really, really basic so that we can get something going very quickly. And the point here is that I just want to show you in the demo that we can now use Podman to build a container image, right? Which is kind of one of the main. So there are a couple of different use cases that we get from having GitLab Runner and the Docker executor. One use case is simply being able to run your CI jobs within the container image of choice. The other main use case is obviously building and publishing your own container images. And in this example, I am showing how to build and publish container images. So I've got my Docker file here, and let's go now pop into our GitLab YAML file so you can take a quick look at what that looks like. So this is a very simple GitLab YAML file. In my variable section, I just got an image tag variable and just basically, simplifying my tagging mechanism for my container image. And the before script section, you'll note here that I'm using Podman to log into my GitLab container registry. So the command is simply podman login, and then I'm passing in the credentials for the GitLab container registry. I've created a job called OCI container build that's in the build stage. And the commands for building and publishing my container image are pretty straightforward. It's podman build, and then tagging the image with the image tag variable, and then podman push, basically pushing it. So with that very simple two lines of script there, I'll be able to build this container image and then push it to the GitLab container registry. And this is all going to be executed on this runner that's over here in this virtual machine that has now been configured to use Podman instead of Docker. I never even installed Docker on that virtual machine, to use Podman as the container runtime. So let's just go ahead and run that pipeline example so you can have a look at that. And I might just pause the video while it kicks off because I have the pipeline set up to run manually. I'm going to run this pipeline for the container build first. I'm going to pause for a second and be right back. Okay, I'm back. Let's take a look at what's happening in this pipeline. All right. So let's make this the only thing you can see on the screen so it's a little bit clearer and there's less sort of like distractions. Close that off. You need to see my Slack window do. Okay, so this is the example. So it's basically running, it's going to walk through what this log is telling us. It's just running with the GitLab Runner version. That's pretty straightforward. It's running on a runner that I call Darren Podman Test Runner. And the important thing to note here is line 4. It says preparing the Docker executor. So again, the purpose of this demo is showing that we're still using the Docker executor in GitLab Runner. So that's why it's still saying preparing the Docker executor. And what's happening behind the scenes, as we talked about, is that we're actually now using Podman as the container runtime, right? Now, because in my config.toml file, and maybe I'll just show it to you one more time so you can get a little bit of context. In this config.toml file, I had set a default image. In this particular case, it was created.io podman stable. And that's why you see it's putting on the image here. Just wanted to call that out so you can kind of see how everything all connects. Then you can see here at line 20, the podman login command. This is where now podman is being used to log in to the container, to my GitLab container registry. Login successful. Then I'm doing line 22, the podman build. This is happening. It's doing the build. It's going pretty fast because it's a very small container image file that we're building, because again, we're building from scratch and just adding in the executable that's created from my main.go file. And then finally, we're pushing that container image out to the registry. So that's really simple example. So in this case, for those trying to figure out different mechanisms to build a container image, option 1, you can just use Podman. This is well documented on the podman.io documentation pages. So you can use Podman itself to build and publish your container images. There's also the option for you to use Buildah as well, and Buildah is part of the sort of the Podman ecosystem. So it's there at buildah.io. There's tons of tutorials here on buildah.io. There's tons of blog posts that have been written by the Red Hat folks in terms of doing different things with Buildah along with Podman. I'm not going to get into that, but you've got both options, and I'll show you the option here now in terms of using Buildah, and what it looks like. So that was the Podman option, and let's go ahead and keep this screen open. And I'm going to actually just open another browser window here. I want to look at this side by side here in a moment so you can see both of these things. So I'm going to come back here for a second. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pop over into a different branch in the same repo. I'm going to pop into my Buildah container build branch. So everything in this branch is the same as the previous branch we were looking at over here, which is the Podman branch. The only thing that's different is the configuration in my GitLab YAML file. So I want to take a look at that. So what's different here is that I've now defined in my GitLab YAML file that I want to use Buildah, and so that's why I have an image line here. I'm going to be pulling in a container image. Specifically, I'm going to be pulling in the Buildah container image from Quay.io repository. And I'm going to use that container image to build and push my Docker file. More specifically, build or push my container that is defined in that Docker file. And yes, there are also, and in this demo, I'm not covering the fact that with Buildah, for example, you don't need a Docker file. Maybe in a subsequent video, I will spin something up along those lines to show that flexibility as well. But there are some tutorials and blog posts, as I mentioned before, if I recall correctly, linked from the Buildah page that shows you how to use Buildah with sort of like a batch script and so forth. So you can get really intricate in what you might be able to then do in terms of building your container images with Buildah. But in this example, Buildah is just going to be using the Docker file that's at the root of this repository. And the only thing here, everything is the same except for we replace Podman with Buildah. So Buildah is doing the login to my container registry. Buildah is doing the build of the container image, and the build command for Buildah is Buildah bud, and then it's doing the push. So this is the main change. We're using Buildah here, and then to make this work, I have defined in this YAML file that I want to use. I want to run those Buildah commands in this Buildah container image. So let's just run it. We know it's going to work, but just so you can see it here live, we're going to go ahead and run that pipeline as well. I'm going to run this one, and this is going to be the Buildah container build branch. I'm going to pause that for a second and be right back so it kicks off. All right, that should be going now. Oh yeah, and so that's popping along nicely. While that's wrapping up, let's drag these side by side. I can kind of collapse all this stuff. Yep. So I want you to see this example. So this on the right hand side of the screen is the Buildah example, and the left hand side of the screen was the example of me using Podman again. So both of these pipeline jobs are running on the same GitLab Runner. Darren Podman test runner blah 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 6-EF9 AHY. Line 4, both will look the same, preparing Docker executor. Line 5 is different. You can see now, because I had specified that Buildah image in my pipeline, it's now using Docker executor with image Quay.io Buildah stable. It pulls that image, prepares my environment here, and then we get down to the actual line 19 where things are different. Actually, this is on line 20 here. So here's the Podman login, was when we use Podman. In this case, we just use Buildah. Then it did the build of the image, then Buildah pushed the image, and it says writing manifest. Everything is pretty much the same. So the main differences here, very clearly, Podman in one example, Buildah in the next example. So GitLab Runner, Podman, installed on the Linux VM. We configured GitLab Runner to use a Docker executor, but then we changed the host string and pointed the host string to Podman, so that Podman is replacing Docker. Right? I want it to be 100% clear. I never installed Docker on that VM. That VM only had Podman and GitLab Runner. And then just to wrap things up, let's take a quick look at the container registry here. So you go to packages and registry, container registry, and we can see, yep, published 2 minutes ago. So the Buildah container, the tagged version from the Buildah container build branch is here. The tagged image version from the Podman container build branch is here. So just to wrap things up, then I'm going to pop over to our Runner docs page, and I want to show you that so everything I just covered is now available on the Runner docs page. And let me just do a search for executors. And you go to here. And so docs.gitlab.com/runner executors dockers. And on the right hand side, you'll see, and you can do a search for that as well, using Podman to run Docker commands. So this is now in beta. We have a couple of issues to work out before we can officially release the GA version of this, which we expect to happen in the next 2 months. This demo video I'm creating at the end of GitLab 15.1. So within the next 2 release milestones, we hope to have a GA version of this release. We're working through a couple of issues, and we're pretty close with the Red Hat team on getting a couple of issues resolved to the point where we are very super comfortable saying that this is a GA product. But so far in my testing, things are looking pretty stable. So that's why we were comfortable releasing this as beta. As you can see, you can build a container image with Podman as a drop-in replacement for Docker. And Podman, and I know it's now becoming a bit overloaded as I keep saying it, I'm hearing it myself. But yes, you can. So Podman is a drop-in replacement for Docker. That's a container runtime kind of the view. Then you can use Podman itself for building your container images, or as I just demonstrated, you can use Buildah for building your container images. And then of course you can also just run regular pipeline jobs. You can run non-image building pipeline jobs as well, right? So you're running a Node.js job, you pull down your Node.js image and you execute your scripts. All of that functionality is there for you. So that's it. So just to wrap up, this was a demo of Podman as a drop-in replacement for Docker. Depending on the feedback we get on the demo, on the videos and so on, we'll determine kind of what's next in the series of videos as we head down this path. So thanks for watching. Hopefully this was helpful for you, and see you next time. Cheers.